So do you think as a nation state India has failed?
100%. We don't even satisfy Ambedkar's criterion of a nation state. When
Ambedkar, do you think democracy is going to work in India?
When the enemy thinks you are near, you should be far away. When the enemy thinks you are far away, you should be near. The enemy should never know what you are thinking. I think some of the things that will go immediately, regional parties, hereditary parties, religion-based parties, the moment the legislation is passed, it goes to the court. And in a lighter vein, I would say that today the Western world, they like India, but they don't like Bharat.
समय की एक बड़ी खबर आपको बता दें
कि भारत और इंडिया में क्या फर्क और क्या समानता
कैन यू चैलेंज इंडिया?
क्या भारत का नाम बीजेपी रखेंगे?
आपको बोलना है वोट फॉर इंडिया बोलेंगे? गोदी मीडिया अगर नहीं है तो ऐसे मुद्दे हवा हो गए होते, उड़ गए होते.
People ask me, are India and Bharat the same? Then I always say yes and no, but because the whole concept of Bharat is different from the concept of India. I would like to see it even written in English, Bharat only, not India. Bharatvarsha was never interested in extending its domains beyond. The answer lies in the nature of Sanatana Dharma itself. The glorification of Ashoka, forgetting that most of the violence that he did was done when he was a Buddhist. It is actually, we are going from Ashoka to Chanakya.
Is it?
I think so. So you are fighting with a weapon that the enemy doesn't even recognize is a weapon. The problem here, Lipika, is not हम हिंदुओं में नहीं है problem. The problem is something that the subcontinent have to address.
उत्तिष्ठ जागृत प्राप्य वरान्न बोध. Arise, awake and strive for knowledge. नमस्कार. हाल ही में डिलिमिटेशन को लेकर चर्चा गर्मा गई है. ये पहली बार नहीं है कि भारत चुनावी सीमाओं के पुनः निर्धारण की बात कर रहा है. ये एक्सरसाइज पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस 4 बार की जा चुकी है. सिंस इंडिपेंडेंस, इंडिया हैज अंडरटेकन द डिलिमिटेशन एक्सरसाइज इन 1952, 1963, 1973 एंड 2002. परंतु 1976 में एक निर्णय लिया गया और इस एक्सरसाइज पर 2000 तक रोक लगा दी गई. कहा गया कि पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल को इनकरेज करने के लिए यह किया जा रहा है. लेटर दिस फ्रीज वाज एक्सटेंडेड अंटिल 2026. अब जब हम 2026 की डेडलाइन की तरफ मूव कर रहे हैं, डिलिमिटेशन और रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ स्टेट्स पर डिबेट तूल पकड़ रहा है. Southern states like Tamil Nadu and Telangana express concerns. उनका मानना है कि उन्हें सक्सेसफुल पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल के एफर्ट्स के बदले पीनलाइज किया जा रहा है, क्योंकि इसके चलते उनका पॉलिटिकल इन्फ्लुएंस कम हो जाएगा. कैसे? क्या है आखिर डिलिमिटेशन? क्यों कुछ स्टेट्स और पॉलिटिशियंस इस पर नाराज हो रहे हैं? क्या डिलिमिटेशन से हिंदी भाषी क्षेत्रों और नॉन हिंदी भाषी क्षेत्रों के बीच बढ़ रहा तनाव और गहरा जाएगा? Joining us today is Professor Gautam Desiraju, a distinguished scientist and a profound thinker on national issues, whose previous book, Bharat, India 2.0, laid the foundation of reorganization of states. उनकी थ्योरी है कि भारत को 75 राज्यों में रीऑर्गेनाइज किया जाए. उनकी नई किताब एक कदम और आगे बढ़कर डिलिमिटेशन पर शोध है. आइए जानते हैं कि क्या 2026 के बाद भारत की राजनीतिक तस्वीर बदलने वाली है. Will southern states face political marginalization? Should India consider creating new states based on linguistic, cultural or administrative factors? Let's dive right into this conversation with Professor Desiraju. Namaskar sir, welcome to the Indic Pen Uttishta Bharata series.
Namaskar, very pleased to be with your channel, Lipika. Been looking forward to this.
We are honored to have you here sir, and this is your second book that is out, but I thought क्योंकि आप दिल्ली आ रखे हैं तो मुझे आपसे आपकी पिछली किताब के बारे में बातचीत करना शुरू करना चाहिए, बिकॉज दैट सेट्स द टोन फॉर दिस न्यू बुक ऑन डिलिमिटेशन. So my first question, therefore, comes from your previous book, which was Bharat 2.0, where you have proposed the theory that Bharat should be reorganized into 75 states. ये 75 की जो संख्या है, 75 का जो संख्या है, वैल्यू है, ये कहाँ से आया है और आप क्या करना चाह रहे हैं इसके थ्रू, क्या बताना चाह रहे हैं?
मैम 75 ये तो अप्रॉक्सीमेट नंबर है.
ओके.
It is a number which is larger than 28,
ओके.
which is the present situation. So 75 उन दिनों में मैंने रखा क्योंकि 75th anniversary of independent आ रही थी. This is why I put 75 just for fun, but it could be a number like 70 or 65 or 90 or 95. It is that kind of a thing. And the main idea in Bharat India 2.0, which incidentally is still selling very well, this is what I am told, is that Bharat being a civilizational state, as opposed to India, which was conceived as a nation state. A civilizational state cannot be governed in the manner of the nation state. And that idea is actually taken forth in the second book, the Delimitation book, which is actually more about how a civilizational state should be governed. So the states should, by now there are two states here. State with a capital S is the civilizational state. Our states of the union is the small s. This is an important linguistic difference.
अच्छा.
These smaller states have to be civilizational in nature to be governed as part of a larger civilizational state. And the small 75 states are definitely civilizational because they have been defined using history, geography, culture, language, religion, all the different, what shall we say, micro-diversities of Bharat. So, as a result, if the basic unit for administration, the small state, is defined civilizationally, that will form part of the civilizational state of Bharat or Bharatavarsha. And it can then be governed in such a fashion with, ideally, a new dharmic constitution, which will set the smooth pathway towards Hindu Rashtra, which is something we all desire.
But what you're proposing, sir, is something larger than life, which looks impossible to me at the moment.
Yes.
From this, what arises is the question कि ये civilizational state or nation state में, how do you differentiate, and why should there be, why are we differentiating between the civilizational state and the nation state?
Fair enough question. Let us, to understand this a little better, we will mention three terms: country, nation, civilization. Let's start with country, which is the simplest. It is simply a political region. The lines on the map, political map of the world, that is country. A country is recognized by other countries.
Okay.
People who live in the country are called citizens. They have a passport issued by the country. So if you look at our blue passport, or for some of us the white passport and the red passport, it will be written Republic of India, Bharat Ganarajya. So that is a political thing which is called a country. A country is more a set of rules which allows people to live there and maintain some paperwork. And this is for this reason, sometimes in certain countries, you are allowed to hold two passports, dual citizenship.
Dual citizenship.
India does not allow dual citizenship, incidentally, but many countries do, notably the USA. So, a country in and of itself does not inspire that kind of a, loyalty from the stomach, shall we say. It is merely an official fact, it's an administrative fact that I am an Indian citizen and I have these things. The higher concept is that of a nation. And one of the best definitions of nation was provided by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Nation is a more powerful concept. The members of a nation feel a strong kinship with each other for whatever reason. And they feel a certain, kinship of association. They feel they are part of a group. It expects and demands inclusion. Likewise, it expects and demands exclusion. Anybody whom the nation feels doesn't belong to the nation, it removes them from its idea of nationhood. So there's a strong sense of exclusivity also when you define nation. And the interesting thing about nation is that sometimes a nation is associated with a country.
Okay.
But many times it does not have to be associated with the idea of a country. This is something that is a lot of misconception about this. So for example, I can have something called Telugu nation.
Okay.
It would be people who speak Telugu all over the world, wherever they may live.
So what you're saying is it's not really defined by a boundary.
It doesn't not defined by a boundary, certainly not defined by a boundary. And it certainly doesn't have to be associated with the idea of a country. All the Telugu speaking people in the world, and mind you, there are many of them in the USA today.
Yeah.
All of them are not going to get together and saying, we want to form a Telugu country with a passport written in Telugu and all that. No, nothing of the sort. It is just an affinity, a strange affinity that comes because they're all speaking the same language.
Correct.
So, but there are, where nation and country overlap is a predominantly European idea.
Okay.
So this is called nation state. Moment you have that word state, that means there is some political connection and there are domains and boundaries and so on. So in the first book, ye pehli wala pustak, Bharat India 2.0, in chapter 3 I trace the idea of the nation state, which is about 500-600 years old in Europe. The famous 30-year war and the Treaty of Westphalia. Following the 1815 Congress of Vienna, Metternich of Austria. So this concept of a nation state in Europe meant an area defined by boundaries like a country, but where the people in that region were strongly had this feeling of nationhood. And I would say the textbook example of a nation state is France. Because this French language coincides with the borders of the country which we call France, and cuisine, habits, culture, everything, economy.
History.
It's a long history, it's an old country. The idea of nationhood was very strongly developed in France, and this is true of many European countries today. So post World War I, which in many respects I feel was much more important for world history than World War II. World War II is something, because of Hitler and Stalin and all, everybody knows about it. But actually, most of the big changes that happened on the world map happened at the time of World War I. Because suddenly from the age of empires, we went into the age of nation states. So Europe gave the prototype for a nation state. So when the Brits left India,
that is the prototype.
They sort of made this into a nation state. Both India and Pakistan, they defined in the format of a nation state. And the problem, as I saw it in the first book, the Indian Constitution, was that it was a constitution written for a nation state. Our systems of governance also are those corresponding to the nation state, the Westminster system with the first past the post and this kind of thing. and our lower house, upper house, the way they defined it. This is all typical of the nation state of those times. But then we come to the highest idea, namely civilization.
So before you go on to the civilization part of it, and I'm interrupting you here, just a quick question. So do you think as a nation state, India has failed?
100%.
Okay. That's
Because
quite a
we are
statement.
not a nation state. That's the first thing. Because we don't have, we don't even satisfy Ambedkar's criterion of a nation
Of a
state.
nation state.
Because we do have so many mini Telugu nation, Kannada nation. You know,
Punjab.
Punjab is a nation. Strong feeling, you know. There are so many nations in our country, and this is not with a negative sense that I'm saying this.
True.
These nations don't want to become countries. Absolutely not. Because we feel very rightly that we are part of a great civilization called Sanatana Dharma or Bharatavarsha as it is expressed. Now, a country, I would say, is defined by politicians. After big wars and big treaties and settlements, countries get run and rerun. The whole Ottoman Empire was made into half a dozen countries which are still fighting. That itself shows the falsity of that division
Entire
after World
division.
War I. Iraq, Syria, Israel, Jordan, they're all artificial creations. Nothing, no basis for those countries.
And this redefining is still happening with
It's
the
still
war,
happening
yeah.
because the original thing was not correct. 100 years ago,
With
it
the
was not
Russia
correct, so
and
we're still
Ukraine
going
and-
through.
yeah, true.
I've written a recent article on Balochistan in Organizer, which indicates, the breakdown of this nation-state concept in areas of the world which never believed in nations.
Nation state.
Yeah, the whole concept of nation-states is sharp boundaries. We recently, we've closed that border. You go to Attari, you're in India. Then you cross a line. A line has it has only one dimension. It has no breadth. So across no breadth, you cross on the other side, you are in another country.
Another country.
You are in Vaga and you are in another country. When you come to civilizational states, they have fuzzy boundaries. So as I said, countries created by politicians. Nations are created by people. Civilizations are created by nature. They are intrinsic to nature itself. So if you take the region today, which is of great interest to us, in our northwest area, if you start somewhere between, say, Ludhiana, Jalandhar, and you keep traveling westwards, and you go through, say, Lahore, and there are Ismail Khan, and then Kabul, and, that whole region, that is a sort of a grey area between civilizations.
True.
We've got this great Indian civilization and we've got the great Russian civilization. And the Eurasian landmass.
True.
And then on the other side, the great Chinese civilization. So between these great civilizations, which one can even call the modern empires of the world, you have all these small buffer areas which big civilizations demand as a kind of a soft boundary. So now you can see how ill-suited is the idea of a nation state in a part of the world that only recognizes fuzzy borders.
True.
And so India, or I should rightly call it Bharat, because that is the title of the first book. And even in the second book we say for a better democracy in Bharat. We don't say for a better democracy in India. And in a lighter vein, I would say that today the Western world, they like India, but they don't like Bharat.
Bharat. True.
That is the key difference. People ask me, are India and Bharat the same? Then I always say yes and no, but really no. Because the whole concept of Bharat is different from the concept of India. And today, even so many of my foreign friends, and I have so many of them, they are used to the idea of me calling my country Bharat.
Bharat.
I feel I'm a Bharatiya, I'm not an Indian anymore. So, before long, let us hope, Lipika, that we will have already it says Bharat Ganarajya, but I would like to see it even written in English, Bharat only, not India.
I think that transition has started to happen with people calling, at least the people starting to call it Bharat.
Foreigners are calling it Bharat now,
True,
not just
true,
us.
True.
And which is why the title of the first book was called Bharat India 2.0. India 2.0. India 1.0 was India, which ended in May 2014, according to me. And the last 10 years, it has been transitioning from India 1.0 to India 2.0. I think now we are fully at Bharat now. I think we feel Bharatiya. And I think this is very important because this is coming from the people. It's not the politicians who are telling us that you are Bharatiyas.
True. So this brings us to the third point about civilization that you wanted to cover. That, how Bharat as a civilization doesn't really fit into the idea of the nation state.
Correct. So Bharat is very old. It's 5,000 years old. The origins are certainly in the Vedas or even before that. And they gave us our blueprint for living. And there's practically nothing that they don't cover. And if you take auxiliary books like Arthashastra and Susruta, Charaka, or all the ancient things, all facets of life, how to live properly and actually how to live in a very good economic condition. Because Bharat till about 1,000 years ago was a very rich country.
True.
So whatever they were doing, they had a full understanding of nature. I told you civilizations are created by nature. So they lived a kind of life that was in conformity with nature. They believed in taking things from nature that were good, but not disturbing nature to the extent that you were going to harm yourself in the long run.
Right.
So as you can see, all the ideas of ecology, environment, everything was already laid down in the Shastras. Actually, there's nothing that's not there if we choose to read it carefully enough. And I would feel that today in this new paradigm, which is called Indian Knowledge Systems, IKS. If people would study IKS properly, I think there are many things for us to learn and actually use in our daily life. Actually, many of the things we do use without realizing it. But this is what characterizes a civilization. A civilization is something first with fuzzy borders. And then there is a certain higher code of behaving, which in our case is called dharma. Other civilizations have other equivalents like China and Russia and things like that. But we have what we call dharma, which is a concept that goes above religion.
True.
Which is why if you think about dharma and Sanatana dharma, which is the eternal dharma, it is something that goes way above religions.
True.
It is supra-religious. And it is a code of conduct which helps you to distinguish between right and wrong. Dharma does not say anything about what is correct or incorrect. It certainly doesn't try to tell you what is true and what is false. It just says, it helps you to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. And that is a matter of, at a first level, an individual to decide. And then the individuals find that all the individuals within their vicinity are roughly thinking the same thing. So Radhakrishnan says that when the individual yearning is seen to manifest itself in many individuals, that is how a civilization is born. Because many people are thinking in the same way. And they feel it is a way that is the best possible way of living to optimize dharma, artha, kama, moksha. You know, the whole concept of purushartha. It comes, inme se aa rahe the. All these things come from this. And the modern context, and Chanakya also says this, that artha comes first. Without artha, you cannot maintain dharma also. You can't maintain that.
True.
So, aisa hi chal rahi hai. So, I think...
So, what I understood and gather from what you've stated so far is that while countries are a political necessity, it's the nature that defines civilization.
Correct.
But when we talk about the nature and civilization and sharing a civilizational identity. Bharat used to be a much more expansive piece of land that way, if we define it from the civilization point of view. And slowly we've lost a lot of it to invaders, to different, political and physical and economic and several other conditions, one of which was the identity of people, and people not wanting, who didn't feel part of that civilization, demanded separate states, and they got it. Now again we are in a situation where we are facing similar issues in different parts of the country. How then does the civilization really overcome this kind of challenge that is being faced currently?
Nice. So we talked about land. Let's take Bharatavarsha, which as a rough indicator, not exactly, can be defined as the location of the 51 Shakti Pitas.
Correct.
That will be a sort of a loose demarcation of.
Fair enough.
Bharatvarsha was never interested in extending its domains beyond this. We are not a civilization that believed in conquest.
Expansionist, yeah.
And this is another thing which I should mention about a civilization, unlike a nation. A civilization is a geographical concept.
Acha.
Without the land, there cannot be a civilization.
True.
Savarkar said, Punya Bhumi. Lalita Sahasranamam says, Dhara, Dharasuta, Dhanya, Dharmini, Dharmavardhini. Dhara, the land.
The land.
Geography is the most important. It is not ideas or culture, because it is the land that leads to all these things. Because land leads to agriculture. Agriculture is defined by the climate. It is the agriculture which makes you do things in a certain way. It is not a coincidence that most of the Vedas and their subsequent dissemination happened on the banks of the Sindhu, the Ganga and the Yamuna. This is the crucible of our civilization. Everything comes from here. This is our sacred geography. We started off in Bharatavarsha with an area of about 70 lakh square kilometers. Due to the reasons you mentioned, it is now 32 lakh square kimeters in the Republic of India.
We've lost half of it.
We've lost more than half.
More than half.
Almost, 70 to 42. No, little less than half we've lost. Now, why did we lose it? The answer lies in the nature of Sanatana Dharma itself. We never believed that others are different from us. So, when according to the Hindu way of conducting warfare, the warriors take rest in the evening. That's why we don't fight in the night.
True.
We don't believe, and so when people say this Prithviraj and he was too generous to Muhammad Gaur and all, he was only following Sanatana Dharma. The fact that others, the Muslims and then the British,
Don't follow.
not only do they not follow, they came with the specific idea of destroying Sanatana Dharma. Certainly, both these groups, whether you talk about conversion by the sword, as the Muslims did, or conversion through the mind, as the Christian missionaries did. So they tried to actually remove people from Sanatana Dharma. It was a very conscious effort. And this is something that Sanatanis are singularly ill-equipped to handle. Which we see that weakness even today. People keep saying that we don't have any idea of Shatru Bodh. Even today with the enemy at our gates, you have all these Aman Ki Ashas and, candlelight thing and, Mai Abdul and all this sort of stuff. Rubbish. This essential idea that the enemy has to be confronted and destroyed. It's a glorification of Ashoka, forgetting that most of the violence that he did was done when he was a Buddhist. And the de-emphasis of Hindu kings. This great emphasis of Buddhism by the Indian state, completely artificial. I think the seeds of this thing were gradually implanted in the people for the last 70 years. And now I think we are coming out of that phase.
Okay.
It is actually, we are going from Ashoka to Chanakya.
Is it?
I think so. We are thinking like that. That today, what else is it if we are not following Chanakya when we flooded Muzaffarabad with Jhelum water last week? That's pure and simple Chanakya. So you are fighting with a weapon that the enemy doesn't even recognize is a weapon. So 2 days you take away water, the third day you put excess water. The people are running here and there. They don't know what's happening. So wars today, they're proxy wars, they're cyber wars, they're wars of the mind. Today Millennium Post has an article on how software can be used to
New age warfare.
to engage in warfare. And so we are following Chanakya. So which means, even though we might not have read him, we are following it. How does that happen? Because our basic thinking is on those terms. We are thinking like Bharatiyas finally. A war doesn't necessarily mean military tanks and missiles and going there. You can destroy the enemy from within the mind.
True.
And when you said, the last part of your question was that, as members of a civilizational state, what do we do with it? Well, here I feel that the problem here, Lipika, is not, हम हिंदुओं में नहीं है problem. I think the problem is something that Muslims of the subcontinent have to address. Because if you look at the present disposition of the 1.5 or so billion Muslims all over the world, most of them, I would say, are pretty well adjusted in the countries in which they live. The problem comes with subcontinental Muslims. I think they have a very peculiar problem because whether they were converted by the sword or whether they were converted because of economic reasons or whatever, the fact that Sanatana Dharma is such a powerful religion and the fact that they have left it, I think many of them may even be pondering and questioning as to why their forefathers left this religion. And I find even in talking to a few Pakistanis, naturally the number will be limited, people there ask why their grandfathers or great-grandfathers moved. Maybe many Muslims in India question why their grandfathers or great-grandfathers did not move. And I think there is a period of questioning as to who they are. And I think this problem continues for subcontinental Muslims, even if they live in UK, Canada, USA, wherever they may be. This bugaboo doesn't leave them.
Before we move ahead, just a small reminder to hit the subscribe button. But then, sir, if there is this problem,
Yes.
and it is a problem which is, as the years pass, is growing.
It's getting worse.
It's growing worse. How does reorganizing of the internal boundaries, how does that help? In fact, especially when we talk about the demographic change that several places in India have seen, how does the reorganizing really actually helps? Because in this way, what we envisage or what we see happening is that some spaces will purely be electing their representatives based on religion, while others might want to elect using the dharmic philosophy that's ingrained in us.
Okay, good question again. If you look at my 75 states, the demographic problem does not exist fully in 60 of them.
Okay.
So that's a great majority. A problem may exist in UP. It may not exist in Bagelkhand. So again, simple demography. And there have been adequate studies done by scholars all over the world. And I have recounted this in my long review of Venkat Dhulipala's book on Pakistan, the New Medina. And he gives very elaborate statistics for this. The behavior of Muslims in any country changes whether they are less than 5% or greater than 20%. When they are less than 5%, they are completely docile and almost invisible. When they are more than 20%, it quickly goes to 100%. Because then they demand and claim and get so much that before long it becomes 100%. The troublesome zone is between 5 and 20%, which is where Bharat lies today.
Do you really think so? I feel the census is going to throw some really
I don't know.
shocking.
I don't know. I mean,
Numbers.
it may be more, it may be less. I have heard people say that Muslims systematically overcount themselves and Hindus systematically undercount themselves.
Okay.
So this could be anything. But let's say, being generous, it won't cross 20% today. The number of, it won't cross.
Okay.
And in this sort of a situation, a lot of responsibility on the state. In 60 of my states, you will not have this problem at all. It leaves 15, of which 6 are actually Muslim majority states among my 75. 2 of them technically don't belong to India still, but they are number 1 and number 2 in my list, Gilgit and Baltistan. So I think they're coming one way or the other. Even without us firing a shot, they may come and want to join us for purely economic reasons. You know, why don't you want to be a member of a richer club, you know? Why do you want to stay as part of a poorer lot?
Right.
In the end, it boils down to money. I told you, Artha comes before anything else in the world. So, the other 4 which belong to India now, one is Kashmir, which is the valley. One is Hastinapur, which is probably where we are located right now, the region immediately to the west of Delhi. The third is Kamtapur, which is in the Chicken's Neck area, little bit of Malda, Murshidabad, then Kishanganj in Bihar, and who knows, maybe 1 or 2 districts in today's Bangladesh. So, which I feel again is ripe for the taking. It's just a matter of the political will, and I'm sure militarily we can do it. So that will be 1, and the 4th Muslim majority will be Malabar.
Okay.
Which is the northernmost part, Malappuram, our famous Wayanad and all that. So these 6 states we have proposed that there must be something. If Sanatana Dharma is so strong, and if the feeling of Bharatiyatva is so strong, we must have what is called civilizational confidence in our civilizational depth. So whether it is through Garvapsi, which is being done today, or whether it is in the process of getting together the middle group of more educated Muslims, and thereby decreasing the power of the mullahs, who in the end are only propped up by certain regional and opposition parties. They are in themselves nothing, or money from America or whatever it is. And we are pretty good now, I think, at chopping the sources of money. You remove money again, much of this thing will die down. Plus, we have advocated that for these 6 states, the central government must be armed with draconian powers, that at the slightest sign of any kind of even vague trouble, like what we did in Sambal, 10 times that magnitude, center should be able to do. And without any power of any court to interfere in that matter.
But that is where the challenge these days.
Well, that is the job for our legislators. Why are we electing them? The legislator's job is not to rubber stamp the views of the executive. And that's the other thing which we mention in both our books, that a separation of the legislative and executive wings of the government is an absolute must, because this Westminster system only works for countries without a written constitution. And there is only one such country in the world today, that is UK. Even the other countries that follow the so-called Westminster system like Canada, Australia, New Zealand have changed many provisions, important provisions they have changed. So clinging on to this Westminster system again is of no use to us. And the Supreme Court simply cannot interfere in the case of these 6 Muslim states. And I think it is within the powers of Parliament. Parliament, you see what has happened to it. This is another thing which we have written about in both books. We need a thorough review of Keshavananda Bharati.
Acha.
Because the court has absorbed so much power, and it is now taking all sorts of executive actions which it is never supposed to do. The maximum they can do is to interpret if a legislation is within the 4 corners of the constitution. That's all. They can't start saying that, you do this or you do that, or you hold an election in Kashmir. Who are they to say anything of the sort?
But we are also following their orders, so to say.
Why? It's not we. I think it shows the weakness of Parliament. The powers of Parliament are very considerable in the Constitution. And I believe that power is only power if it's power exercised. I have the power and then I don't use it. Then you are actually, in my mind, powerless. Or if the present legislature is so scared of the PM and the cabinet, that and we have this silly anti-defection law of Rajiv Gandhi of 1985, that further removed the power of the fate of a MP who belongs to the ruling party and is not a minister is very pathetic today. All he has is one of these dilapidated bungalows in Lutyens, Delhi. He has very little else to do. He can go and cut some ribbons or, pretend to be important in his constituency now and then. But more than that, he really can't do much. And free and frank debate of the type which existed till Indira Gandhi's time in the parliament. Nehru looked at the young Atal Bihari Vajpayee debating as a lone member almost of the Jansangh, and then he said, this boy is going to become the Prime Minister of India one day. So, we had parliamentarians, whether it was Nehru or Balraj Madhok or Vajpayee himself. They were, people of substance. Some of the speeches that Gayatri Devi has made in Parliament, and they're all memorable. Minu Masani.
True.
There were people, they didn't care which political party they belonged to, but they were all speaking in the interests of the country. And that is what is important. I think we have even failed the Westminster system. And it's ironic that the 1985 anti-defection bill was passed unanimously because people got so sick of this Ayaram Gayaram phenomenon. So the medicine was worse than the disease. And so now we find ourselves in this was not a problem as long as we had coalition governments, ironically, because the hand of the executive is stilled. But if we have a majority in the Lok Sabha, which has been the case since 2014, and today practically our alliance is a majoritarian government, then the whole fate of parliamentary debate has come down. That's why the opposition shouts, because there's nothing else they can do.
True.
Nobody will listen to them. So I think all these things actually are connected, and I feel that India to abhi ek time of flux mein hai. Between India 1.0 and India 2.0. Ye to social sciences wale, they go on telling us all the time, between 2 stable states, there will be an unstable state in the middle. So I think we should partly expect this also. And in that spirit, take up delimitation, take up the small states, and I would leave interested people to buy the book and read it. But essentially, if you want to spin it down to a few words, you can't change the population of the country. So change the states so as to make them of equal sizes. And it's not an arbitrary division of Desiraju. It is based on 5 or 6 or 7 very sound factors, some of which go back to 5,000 years. And in the end, it is a modus operandi of how to govern a civilizational state. ये civilizational state ऐसा बात करना और speech देना, this is not the answer. Okay, I'm giving you a civilizational state. How will you run it tomorrow? Will you have a Ministry of Finance? Will you have a Ministry of Expenditure? How do you organize yourselves? So ये तो सब हम सोचना पड़ेगा. We have to think about it more seriously like mature people and not depend on these Twitter Maharajas and all that. This great sir, great sir, great sir. You know, it has captured too much of our discourse now.
True. Sir, you're a scientist. Of course, you have 7-8 very solid reasons and factors based on which the states can be reorganized, the delimitation can take place. But post-independence, the way states were reorganized were based on language. Which again, I think somewhere, even with the current number of states that we have, has not really been a very foolproof way of reorganizing. Now, this is not the first time that such reorganization has happened, neither will this be the last time. But first, for our viewers to understand, how is the reorganizing of states different from the delimitation exercise?
Delimitation can happen by itself.
Okay.
Without reorganization. Reorganization can happen by itself independent of delimitation. The book attempts to show that a proper delimitation can only happen with reorganization.
Okay.
Because delimitation as it stands today, you can reorganize the 543 seats of the present Lok Sabha, taking population into consideration. And that is a solution that our Home Minister has said is ruled out. Now, under that scheme which he has ruled out, Tamil Nadu instead of 39 seats will have 27.
Which is a pain point for them right now.
UP instead of 80 will have 93. So he has ruled that out. Okay, let him rule it out. No problem. So he says that with the present seats you cannot do it with population. But you cannot have any delimitation unless it is population based, because each vote must have the same value.
Okay.
That is the basic principle of a democracy. My vote cannot be different from your vote. My vote cannot be more than yours simply because I live in a smaller constituency, which is what effectively is happening today. Now, on the other hand, the state's reorganization is something that can be argued about for so many 5-6 different reasons. Mostly it is sensible economically.
Okay.
Because we've got a section in this second book which is called 75 Economic Powerhouses. That each of these smaller states can concentrate on something that they are really good at doing and develop that industrially to the modern levels, so that then they become not national competitors but international competitors, which is now not possible with these different size states in different kachra-pachra things. And noting also that the 28 states and 8 union territories of the present are partly a heritage of British India, partly a heritage of the old princely states, partly a result of these linguistic states demarcation. The book, incidentally, the second book, is a strong critique of linguistic states.
Okay.
Because while micro-diversities are a good representation of the micro-identity, and if Bharatiyatva is a good representation of your overall civilizational identity, language is a manifestation of nothing. Linguistic state is purely about 120 years old. It is a result of the divide and rule policy of the British. And we show in the book that the first example of a linguistic state, the most unlikely one, this is Orissa. And Odisha is where the British did the divide and rule very well, splitting Odia from Bangla.
Banglas.
So they did that separation so well, and then they created this linguistic state called Odisha. Then after that came the demand in Andhra, and then Bombay got split into Maharashtra, Gujarat. Then it became a sort of a, The
Practice,
Pandora's box
yeah.
had been opened, and then like a dominoes, all these things happened. And the politicians were standing by helplessly. And then language finally became captured by the people in Tamil Nadu to make it a marker of identity. So we show in the book, we hope, convince the readers that language is one of the poorest indicators of identity in India today. Many of us Indians, especially in the south, are multilingual. And there is no big problem about this.
Okay.
And we feel that it is simply a matter of convenience. You talk to somebody in the language in which they understand best.
But it doesn't appear so in the political platforms where Hindi speaking and non-Hindi speaking has become
It's
a
because of the
huge
politicians.
reason for a divide.
Politicians are the ones who are saying, I am Hindi, I am Marathi, I am Bangla.
But what you're saying is that language is not the right way of marking, especially when you are going for this exercise.
No.
Then what is the right way of marking when you are going for a certain exercise? If you're saying it's skill, it should be skill based.
Yes.
Then how do you assess that skill with such a huge population which
You don't have to address this problem at an India level. One of the examples we give is that of a lavender farmer in Kashmir Valley. He or she, I've been to some of those farms, and mostly the workers are women. They need to know only that particular skill of how to pluck that lavender flower in the end. You need the next man to make the oil using quality control that is used of the type that is used in the world leader Bulgaria, which we don't do now. Then you need a marketing person who has a different kind of skill, what we call supply chain. You must have control of the whole supply chain from the plant to the exported product. And believe me, if Kashmir Valley, just that small area, lavender grows wild there by the way, and you know that that plant doesn't need water also. Valley anyway doesn't get much rain, so you don't need water, and so literally you have everything to make a world competitive product, because that is used in all the very expensive French perfumes and all that.
But what you're suggesting is nothing but the Varna Vyavastha system that we had in the ancient Bharat.
Exactly, that's the only thing I'm saying. I'm not saying anything more than that.
Right.
Because if you go, see the rule of war, because everything today is a matter of war, economic war between somebody and somebody else. You play to your own strength. You don't start telling the people in Kashmir, now we are going to put a blast furnace and make iron over here. Your employment is there, the people are there, they know the climate. And incidentally, why do I go on saying we can compete with Bulgaria? Bulgaria and Kashmir, the climate is identical.
Okay.
That's why that lavender and rose grow there so well.
Right.
So just with rose oil and lavender oil, we can beat a whole country. Just that small little part which is called Kashmir Valley. You know, all the terrorists and stone, they will all leave their professions and they will want to only do this because there will be big money in this business. Today, you know, the lavender oil in Kashmir only sells for 1/10 the price of the Bulgarian oil, because we don't have those quality control measures that they have in Bulgaria. Bulgaria has been working on this for 100 years. They actually beat the French in lavender oil and rose oil.
Okay.
The French are buying that from Bulgaria. So you can see that, you know, economics is something where if you put your mind to it properly, and that is why we talk about economic powerhouses. And I have what is called my 4 Ks. 4 of my states begin with the letter K.
Okay.
So Kashmir I have told. Next is Kutch on the western side. That will become the king of solar energy because it's got only sun and no rain. Today Israel is the world leader. But the area of Kutch is bigger than the area of Israel.
I
right?
think they're trying something there.
Of course they're trying, but we can actually beat them. 3rd K is Kongu. Kongu is the part of Tamil Nadu which is around Kovai or Coimbatore.
Okay.
So Kovai and Tirupur, the satellite town, are already beating Bangladesh in textiles.
Okay.
Because it's called used to be called Manchester of the East. The fabrics and cotton fabrics from there are so famous that again it can be a world leader. And my 4th K is Kashi.
Okay.
Kashi is the home of Hinduism and Buddhism in that area. So we'll become Vatican City, because we'll become richer than Vatican City. Today we are spending, you know, lakhs and lakhs of rupees to buy a small number of euros to go there and see Vatican City. we make the foreigners come here and do this. Already, the present government is doing bit like that. But the whole thing can be made into a Disneyland for religious tourism. And so you don't make textiles in Kashi and you don't do religious tourism in Congo. But if each of these little states does the thing at which they are very good, this country will become so rich that we don't have to worry about any of these problems. And the moment the people start becoming a little rich, they'll forget that they're Hindu or Muslim or whatever.
True.
All these things only come because of poverty.
Poverty.
And I think we have to learn how to address the root problems. The country is at a cusp of change. Things have started in 2014 and they're irreversible. Gradually, the political things are coming down. Our 2.5 enemies, one of them is going to probably crumble one of these days.
You look very confident.
I am very confident. I have given so many podcasts and things on that. Baluchistan is the beginning of that story.
It's the 8th day and we are still waiting for some
Chanakya.
action.
Chanakya. Wait. When the enemy thinks you are near, you should be far away.
Far away.
When the enemy thinks you are far away, you should be near. The enemy should never know what you are thinking.
The guerrilla warfare.
And above all, the newspapers don't need to know. Our Twitter Maharajas don't need to know. If they know too much, then they will destroy the country. So Lutyens, Delhi and all these fellows, they don't need to know any of this stuff. I'm fully confident that the present government knows exactly what it's doing. Because this is a golden opportunity, Lipika. ऐसा तो नहीं मिलेगा हमको.
True.
Because China also getting slightly weak now. And they are not, already they could have done so much trouble in Bangladesh. They have not done anything. If we are quiet, they are also pretty quiet. So, abhi to time aa gaya. I'm not just hopeful. I know that the way these people behave and suddenly something will happen and then you will realize abhi to apna number aa gaya.
आ गया. Sir, थोड़ा delimitation पे और बात करेंगे because I would like our viewers to know. As I was saying that this is not the first time delimitation exercises happened. पहले भी 4 बार ये exercise हो चुकी है. So why don't we start with probably telling a little bit more about the history of delimitation as to which of the years and why it happened and then what happened in 1976 that it was stopped.
See, delimitation was going on smoothly in our country.
Right.
Till 1976. Delimitation, as the name suggests, is a changing the limits. Changing the limits of what? Changing the limits of the constituencies, of which there are 543 now. So some small changes will be made to see that the number of people in each of these constituencies is roughly the same. Those who want to know a little bit more about this can go and read Article 82 of the Constitution. That tells you that Parliament is given the power to change these limits.
Okay.
So it was going on nice. Now, mid-70s, fast forward. Indira Gandhi was in a particularly difficult predicament politically. This emergency had begun. This Allahabad High Court judgment and when she was removed as MP and she declared the emergency and so on and so on. So the regional parties like the DMK were also coming up, quite strong. She was scared that if she goes in for one more delimitation, which was going to happen on the basis of the 71 census. Delimitation always happens after the census. So she was scared if she went in for one more delimitation, the constituencies will change so that the Congress does not get so many seats. So therefore she put the freeze. And she could do it with most of the opposition in the jail, part of the notorious 42nd Amendment. So she put the freeze for political reasons. Now again, fast forward to 2001, after 25 years, the Vajpayee government was in power. Now, my understanding is that they did want to have a delimitation then. But for political reasons, the alliance partners did not want it.
Did not want.
Okay, notably Telugu Desam and all those.
But just to clarify that up until then, it was purely based on population.
Only on population.
Okay. Now, coming to 2026. We are in 2025. We have suddenly been made aware of the fact that the census will happen, and now they've added the clause of caste.
Will it happen?
So that's exactly my question. That isn't it too short a time period to conduct such an exercise, because that is needed for a delimitation exercise?
You need a census. Before you can do delimitation, you need a census. Census will take minimum 2 years, and even if you really rush things, 18 months.
Right.
So अभी तो next year January में तो start हुआ तो middle of 27. Time is not enough. 29 comes the general election.
Correct.
ये कैसे करेंगे ये delimitation in such a short period of time? Unless it is some hodgepodge job, which is actually better they don't do any delimitation till 2031.
Oh, is it?
Or even census. इतनी साल तो postpone हो गई, लेकिन postpone it for 2-3 years. And then hold a proper census, proper delimitation, proper small states, work up to it by 2031 and then do a good job of it. I mean, I am all for the caste census. Simply because I'd like to know what castes there are and how many of these castes are fake castes which are now going on for so many years. We have not had a caste census since 100 years, 90 years.
But caste wasn't caste more of a British idea?
It was completely a British idea. That's why I want to know.
Okay.
I am told that in some parts of the north, the same surname you can belong to different castes.
Correct, you can.
Now what's going on? And do we even know whether all these reservations are being done on the right basis? And what is the meaning of caste? I am a strong believer of Varna and Jati, but I don't believe in this concept called caste, because I do not believe in the concept of that any of these things are inherited by birth.
So far we discussed, why delimitation exercise is necessary, but currently we are not in a situation to do the delimitation exercise, because the delimitation exercise needs a census and we don't have enough time to conduct the census. But my question now moves a little bit towards the politics of it. Do you think this delimitation exercise will further politicize this entire idea of national unity? Because you will suddenly see that based on the census, now with the caste added to it as a category, do you see that there will be a further divide among people? It will suddenly become very apparent. 1971 में जब लास्ट सेंसस हुआ था, the census that we refer to right now, उसके बाद से अभी तक there have been huge demographic changes. There have been several identities from different identities that have emerged. So do you see that it will further become a stronger political tool for people, the politicians, to divide us?
In fact, quite the contrary. I feel that small states must of necessity have small problems. And so-called domination of, say, one caste, which has actually captured political power, this may really go down. So because if you take states like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or UP, there will be many, many states where there is a complete absence of a particular caste, which has so far grabbed all the political power in the state.
थोड़ा सा elaborate कर दिए.
So, for example, if you take, to mention names, castes like, say, Vokaliga and Lingayat, which have captured all the political power in Karnataka, we are told, that numerically they are not so strong. And this is the reason why the Karnataka caste census, the results have not been declared for the last 15 years. Similarly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Tevars or the Gaundars in Tamil Nadu are not really numerically so strong. So there will be many of these 75 states where many of the so-called politically powerful castes will be completely wiped off the map. The other thing that will happen is that these family dynasties will end.
Okay.
Because a dynasty may be able to exercise its control over a big thing like Tamil Nadu, or say Pawar in Maharashtra or something. But Pawar may have no influence in Vidarbha at all. So vast regions of the country will be excluded for these guys. And so whatever money making or other schemes that they are trying to do will have to be restricted to very small domains. And the moment you shrink their size, that's what I meant when I said small states will have only small problems. I think some of the things that will go immediately will be regional parties, hereditary parties, religion-based parties. You will not be able to use some of these things. In Bengal, we have divided actually into 3 or 4. Vanga and Mallabhum and Kamtapur and Indrakil.
Okay.
So you won't have all the demographic problems that you have in the Calcutta region, in places in North Bengal and all that. So as a result, these problems will not go away, but they will be more and more isolated in smaller and smaller pockets. And with the overall India economy increasing, अभी हम 4 trillion में हैं. So अभी 5 या 6 trillion if we reach at that level, then many of these things will automatically
Disappear.
Once a person's wallet is more comfortable, he's far less likely to think of himself as a Hindu or a Muslim. Far less likely. It will be there.
Okay.
It won't go away. But it won't become a kind of or a Kannadiga or something like that. These Kannadigas, they're shouting about Kannada simply because they feel that the Odias and the Bengalis have come and taken away their jobs. Finally, it's a matter of a job.
Right.
They coolly forget the fact that they are not willing to work for the wage as low as what the Odia and the Bengali is willing to work for. They forget that. So you see, so it's a complicated thing which is not quite political but also economic. So I think on the whole, and I find in my discussions and talks with so many people like you and students and seniors, faculty members, groups of citizens, the general idea that a small state will do no harm. They may not be willing to admit that it will do good, but they feel it will do no harm to the country. And this old argument that if you have small states, it will lead to balkanization, that is some European idea. It doesn't work in a civilizational state.
So what I've understood so far from the entire conversation is, one, that we need to reorganize ourselves into smaller states in order to enhance our identity of civilization.
Correct.
Second, that is also required for any delimitation exercise to take place. What you're suggesting in your second book is that smaller states are better to have if you want to really do a good delimitation exercise.
Absolutely, correct.
What I also understand is that it should be a skill-based reorganization, which is, according to you, what you suggest is possible based on the strengths of a region, maybe culture, also history as to what they are used to creating and making and producing. What I want to in the end understand is that what would be the 3 or 4 important things that you feel going forward are needed to be done by the government or the people who are ruling to ensure that these things happen smoothly, because otherwise it's a very huge exercise to reorganize. I mean, the sheer reorganization of Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh or Andhra Pradesh and Telangana was in fact a very, very difficult exercise in itself. So smaller states will be a further difficulty. How do you suggest, what are the key points to do this exercise in a smooth way?
I think the first thing is, if you talk in terms of Overton window and so on, is to increase the number of opportunities where common citizens can get together and talk and debate among themselves, strengthen what is called the missing middle, which is the group of more educated citizens who are not elected politicians, but would serve as a means of communication between common citizens and the elected politicians. People like you and me. I think strengthening this group, because nowadays we must end this culture when a single politician comes into a meeting and 104 cameramen are trying to take his picture. That culture must end. A minister should be just somebody who comes quietly to a function to address them and go away. This excessive coverage of these politicians in these TV debates and these cameramen and newspapers and all, this must stop. And we must tell them that we've elected you to do a job, not to come and crowd the audience and crowd the hall. I think this should stop, so that then the common citizen feels more empowered. Today the citizen feels very small. He feels unless he's a member of parliament, he's no good. I think this culture must They have started, of course, this Dalbatti culture. They have tried to end it as much as possible, but still, when you come to a place like Delhi, you're altogether too aware of this culture. It's not so bad in other places. I would say Delhi is probably exceptional. The other thing is that I feel that there should be much strengthening of our academic institutions. Because these are the places where ideas tend to get debated and disseminated to younger generation. Today what is happening is the younger generation, especially in the north, is strongly beginning to get aware of their Hindu roots. But it is going in a wild and uncontrollable fashion.
Okay.
And it should not never lead to violence. Because if we descend into violence in this country, then I fear all is lost. You know, let's go and kill somebody. Or let's do this or let's do that. I think to avoid this kind of thing, there must also be much more proper discussion. I mean, I'm a person who is used to sometimes what you may call certain controlled disruptions. And we must be able to have more control over troublemakers. Because today what's happening is that if you take the work for, which are all necessary civilizational steps, the moment the legislation is passed, it goes to the court. This cannot happen. Because then what is the use of the parliament? If everything can be stopped by the court, then the court might as well take over the complete country, you know. So I think it's not that they're not doing these things, which is why I'm giving it a 4 or 5 year framework, but they should move pretty fast. So that overall people get the feeling that census, caste census, delimitation, small states, this is all part of a democracy growing up.
True.
Thomas Jefferson said.
True.
He said that an older man cannot wear the clothes that he was wearing as a young boy. He will look ridiculous.
True.
You know, today what we are doing is very much something like that.
On that note, thank you so much, Professor Saab. It's always a pleasure listening to you, and it was an honor to have you here in our studios today. I wish to get you back very soon. Whenever you're here next, we will talk more about many other things which you scientifically break down and assess and then tell people about. So thank you very much once again. आपका हमारे लिए समय निकालने के लिए बहुत 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 धन्यवाद.
मैं बहुत happy हूँ कि I came to your podcast and able to talk with you in a very relaxed manner about a serious topic, which I think is the essence of it. And सब viewers के लिए मैं good wishes and pranams to everyone. We are all part of a wonderful new experiment, and all of us should joyously participate in this experiment, young and old, so that we see a nicer Bharat in the future, which is our due.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir. If you want to continue listening in to such interesting conversations about Bharat, do like and subscribe.